So explain to us what libertarian is.
I hear that all the time. Let me tell you what libertarian is. Libertarian is someone who says you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be. Just don't force others to be like you.
Got it.
That's what we are all about. We are all about long-term solutions, not short-term solutions. We're all about changing culture, not just changing law. Law, we have to remember something. At the end of almost every single law is a guy or a gal with a gun who will put you in a cage. And if you don't want to go in that cage, he or she is going to kill you. That means you only use law when it really matters, not just because I'm angry, not because I don't like you, not because you should do some activity I think you shouldn't do or whatever the case may be. It's only for important things like life and liberty and property and things like that. That's when you use violence. That's when you use force. That's what libertarians are all about.
Yes, it is Larry Sharpe and Libertarians Drinking Coffee Live. I'm so happy to have you here with me this afternoon. And, you know, I often have interesting libertarians on and we have chats, but some of you may not know how I got so involved in libertarianism. I originally got brought to the concept from Gary Johnson in 2012. When I first heard him speak, I was like, oh, this seems interesting. These libertarians, I didn't know who they were. I was like, oh, okay, this sounds like it's a pretty cool idea. So I got involved and I was happy to support Gary Johnson in 2012. But about a year later, I was thinking, okay, maybe I should get involved locally. Let me see if I can get around here locally. So I went to my local chapter here in Queens and I saw a guy there and he was talking and he was saying stuff that made sense. Yet again, I'm like, these people are smart. Well, you know who this person was? It was a personal friend of mine, a guy who I adore, someone who I actually had on my ticket this year, running for comptroller of New York State. The man with the legend himself, a former elected official and an activist, Will Schmidt. How are you, sir?
Good, thanks. I'm happy to be on, and thanks for that kind introduction.
Oh, of course. You know, that's how I feel. That's why I tell everybody that story. I love that story. I keep telling it. And, you know, many people, when they go to a libertarian event for the first time, it can be traumatic, right? It can be traumatic. And they're like, I'm never coming back. But I was lucky I had you there. So it was not traumatic. It was, oh, okay, I like this. So I'm happy that that you would be able to be there. So for those of you who think this is going to be a good show, because it's going to be one, do me a favor, like and comment and share. It does matter. Click that button. It is important. Do that if you can so that people know that this is happening. So one of the reasons why, Bill, I tried to get you on my ticket this year, and I'm sorry we couldn't have a better outcome, was because I know you talk a lot about finance, state finance. You've also run it for local government. You've been a local official in the past. Tell me why people should care. It seems for most people, they don't even care about finance, right? They go, oh, finance, whatever. That doesn't affect me. Why do I care? That's you guys writing your big checks. They don't care. Why should it matter to the average New Yorker?
Because it affects their pocketbook very directly. And that's one of the things that I tried to do in the campaign. I did 4 podcasts. I did a deep dive with Angelo Veltri where we went into the problems with the pension system. And a lot of people don't realize, you know, the pension system does affect retirees. I'm a member of the pension system as a retired New York State employee, but it also affects taxpayers because under New York's Constitution, if the pension fund runs into shortfalls where it cannot meet its constitutional obligations, the taxpayers are required by law to backstop that. And
yeah, you know, I brought this up and people think, Bill, this is the part. It's funny. When I tell people about this, and I've mentioned this before, and I say, look, you don't understand, taxpayers have to pay for this, right? If it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then taxpayers today in New York State are going to pay for people who are living in Florida so that they can spend their pensions in Florida today. You're giving money to Florida. And what they often do is go, Larry, we don't have to worry about it because it's in the Constitution. Like that somehow magically makes it okay. So help us.
That's why you do have to worry about it.
There we go. Yes, it's exactly the opposite. So tell me what that means when it comes to my tax burden.
Well, the pension fund, the way it operates now, it's basically a big 401k. The only difference is your 401k is a defined benefit contribution. In other words, you pull out whatever you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
A pension fund is exactly the opposite. It's a defined benefit, not a defined contribution.
Got it.
You put in a small amount the first 10 years of your employment. After you've been in the system for 10 years, you're vested and you don't put any more money in. It's the taxpayers that put the money in. So if that money heads south because of bad investments, taxpayers going to make it up, not you.
Got it. And it seems like the more that we increase with government workers as a percentage compared to private sector workers, isn't that also going to hurt us?
Oh, absolutely. Because, New York, California, Illinois, New Jersey, all these big states, I like to say they're the dog that eats its tail. Because when you have a situation like we do, where people in the private sector are getting out because of high taxes, the only people left to pay the high taxes are the people who are in the system.
Yes.
So they're going to keep paying higher and higher taxes for their own benefits. And that's not a good situation. And that's what we're headed for now.
Well, I think you see that with the unions, with like the tier 1 versus tier 3 versus tier 6. And I've had people complain and say, like, if you're tier 6, you're not really even in a union. Now, that's not true, but that's how they feel, right? They feel like, if I'm tier 6, why am I even in a union? I mean, tier 1s though not everyone's still around for tier 1, but some of the tier 1s, like, they're getting great benefits. I'm getting nothing. I'm paying for their benefits. That's how they feel. And I think that's a dog eats its tail part you're talking about, right? Where now we start renegotiating unions, public sector unions, and all of a sudden now we've got tier 6 actually paying for tier 2 or tier 1. Who's going to pay for tier 6?
Right. And it don't forget, this isn't just public sector unions. This is everybody in government, all the judges, all the state legislators, everybody who, like me, was in a managerial position, who are classified as so-called exempt because we're not union. And this is a huge, you're talking about millions of people either are currently actively employed by New York State or used to be and now are retirees like me who are collecting from the system. So it's a huge number of people.
Well, I guess my other worry is, and there's two other parts that bug me about this. One, as a percentage of our budget, it's getting bigger and our budget's getting bigger. Yeah. So that's exponential. It isn't just, hey, it went from 15% to 17%. Well, it went to 17% and our budget increased by $40 billion on top of it. And I feel like this is not even talked about. I didn't hear this talked about almost at all. It was just like, we'll be fine because it's in the Constitution. So magically just, it's in the Constitution. So magic happens. We don't even discuss it.
Yeah, this is going to be bad. The only question is how bad and how soon. I think it's going to be very bad, and I think it's going to be very soon. And I don't think any of these people have a clue as to how to deal with it. I mean, we saw in the news the other day, it was disclosed in the New York Post, $11 billion in unemployment fraud since COVID. I mean, that's just a mind-boggling sum. That's like 10% of what we're doling out in Ukraine war.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So Joel says pension bomb is still coming and no one's trying to fix it. And I think his point's valid. I worry, though, that the biggest issue is actually going to wind up being another state like Illinois or something. And then when that goes under, then we're going to go, ooh. Is that what we're waiting for? Are we waiting for someone else to go under first?
Well, yeah, in fairness, and I hate to defend the state of New York government on anything, but politicians do look out for themselves here. And the New York State Pension Fund is right now about, I think it's 85% funded to meet its liabilities. So as we sit here today, it's fairly okay. Now, if you go across the river to New Jersey is like 33% funded. They are in really, really dire straits, and they're going to hit that brick wall pretty soon. The problem we have is if all these investments in the pension fund go south because the stock market takes a deep dive, even though we're 85% funded, we'll be right behind them because that 85% is going to drop very quickly. So that's nothing to be complacent about.
Well, the funny thing is, my bigger worry is that was the second piece is we're not even spending the pensions back here in New York State, right? If I'm going to be handing out big pensions, I'd like on my pensions to be like you, spend it here, right? Spend it in New York State. I got at least half the people who retire head someplace else, and a huge chunk, they're snowbirds. I know you're a snowbird now, right?
Right.
Head down south to Florida for the winter and then stay up here for the summer. And that's great. But then I only got half your pension. I want all your pension, right? I want it all to be spent here to keep the economy going so I can keep spending and paying for the pension. It's killing us.
Well, and the problem also is, I mean, yes, there's people like me who just want to be out of New York for the 3 months of the winter, but there's a lot of people who left permanently.
Yes.
And those people didn't go because of the weather. I can guarantee you. Florida is not a comfortable place in August. I've been there and I don't want to be there. But, you know, I'm thinking about it myself because it's just getting, the situation here is getting progressively worse. So the answer to your question is, I mean, how do you solve that problem? Well, you make New York State a more palatable place to live and not stop taxing the bejesus out of everybody and spending on all these wasteful things that we're doing.
Absolutely. Well, we have a fan from Texas. Much love from Texas. So that's good. No state income tax in Texas. So that's kind of cool. So that's a good thing.
We envy
Dylan says, freedom is compassion. Aw, I like that. That's a good one.
Absolutely right.
Shelley says, I paid into the pension fund from 1976, 1992. I should have been tier 1, yet they put me on tier poor. Oh, tier 4, poor. Oh, I don't know. Why? Shelley, do you know why that would happen?
You know, that's a real deep dive.
Oh, okay.
They've been changing the tiers. The first tier goes back, I think, to the 60s.
Okay.
So there aren't too many people in tier 1 anymore.
Right.
But, you know, the legislature, when they had a big budget crisis in the 70s. So they started creating new tiers because they had to. They wanted to nibble away and claw back all those lucrative benefits they gave people in tier 1. So they created a tier 2, which wasn't quite as generous. Right. And they're very clever about it. You know, they can leave the guidelines kind of fluid as to when you qualified for 1 or when you qualified for 2. And of course, then what happened was, as the New York State fiscal picture got bigger in the 80s, the tier 3 and the tier 4 started getting more generous again. So it's this yo-yo up and down cycle that they're doing. And I don't know if they're planning a tier 7, but if they are, I can tell you that won't be very generous.
Absolutely. If you want to follow Bill, you can follow him on Twitter. It's Bill Schmidt 4. That's the number 4 NY. Bill Schmidt 4, the number NY on Twitter. Joseph says, I hope you understand that as for someone who receives one of those pensions, it's hard for someone to vote for someone who wants to cut their pension. I think that's a valid point, Bill. If you're going to sit there and go, I'm worried about the pension, aren't you worried that, oh, I can't vote for Bill. Bill's going to cut my pension. Isn't that what everyone's going to assume?
Well, it is, but I didn't advocate cutting anybody's pension. I think for people that are in the system, who are near retirement, you know, they've planned their life around expecting those benefits. And, you know, they have a reasonable expectation that they're going to get that. What we should be doing is when we do create a new tier 7, starting to tell, you know, somebody who's 23 years old, who's just coming into state employment, look, it's just practical. It's impractical for us to give you the kind of benefits that we gave people who came into the system in 1985. And we have to reform the system. You have to pay more into it. You have to expect less from it. we could create a hybrid with a 401k plan.
Mhm.
By the way, they do have a 401. It's a 457B, which is called the New York State Deferred Compensation Plan. So New York State does offer the equivalent of a 401k. They just don't put any money into it. So what they could do is they could give you the option of saying, okay, I want half of my money in the traditional pension system, and I want you to take half of the other contribution and put it into my 401k fund. And that money is mine now, and it's not yours.
Got it.
There's a lot of creative ways that you can, number one, give more financial freedom to people coming up into the system at the same time as you make the financial reforms that you need to do.
Well, the second piece I bring up is I tell people this. I say, look, and this was back in 2018. I was even bringing this up. I said, in 10 or 15 years, it's going to go away. And they would come back and say, Larry, it can't go away. It's in the Constitution. And what I said is, when there's no money, you don't get paid. It doesn't matter if it's in the Constitution or not. When there's no money, you don't get paid. That's how that works. And then you have to fall back to some kind of pension insurance, whatever that. I don't even know what the state pension insurance is, but I remember when the Teamsters had to do pension insurance back, what was it, 90s? I don't remember when the Teamsters went under, but they had some problem with their pension. They got like 30 cents on a dollar. They did not do well with their pension insurance.
Right.
So if we have to fall down that road, I'll tell someone, hey, look, we have to reform it. Or what happens when you're accustomed to getting, X dollars? Now you're going to start getting 1/3 X. How are you going to pay your bills and live your lifestyle on 1/3 X? And sadly, they probably won't tell you anything. So it's going to happen overnight. It's going to be like it crashes and then you're screwed.
And by the way, just so you know, this has already happened in certain parts of the country. The city of Detroit, their pension system for sanitation workers went bankrupt.
Yep.
This was 10 or 15 years ago. And I was watching an interview with an elderly African-American sanitation worker. And it was heartbreaking because his pension, when he retired, he was getting a pension of about $26,000 plus Social Security. And with that, he was able to live a modest but fairly comfortable retirement lifestyle. The pension system went bankrupt. They cut his pension from $26,000 down to $6,000, and they also took his healthcare retirement benefits away. And now he had to, So you can write what you want in the Constitution. Go read the Venezuelan Constitution, which guarantees all these goodies, and see if they're making good on them.
Absolutely. And that's the point I keep bringing up. People think it's magic. It's in the Constitution, so it's magic. Right. When there's no money, you don't get paid. It doesn't matter. You can write whatever you want in any book and anything you want. There's no money. You're not getting paid. And it's going to fall back.
Or you get paid with Weimar dollars, and it's like a trillion marks.
Exactly. Yes.
Go buy a loaf of bread with that.
I'm getting $26,000 a year. Well, that sounds good. Yeah, it buys me milk. That's all it gets me. It gets me some milk. So my coffee's nice, but that's about all. So yes, but no, I think it's a valid point, and people get. I try to tell them that because I want them to care, right? And I'm with you. I don't think we should just go, that's it, your pension goes away. I think it's unfair and it's cruel. Right. I think we should have to negotiate it in some way, shape, or form to eventually, over time, get everybody into some type of 401k. And I was talking about starting a negotiation in 2018 because I figured it would literally take years to negotiate it, and then even more to actually make it work, to be fair to people, that to actually make it work. I was even worried that the state might have to go into more debt initially to kind of make things right, to right the wrong that might have to work, because I knew it's a massive thing, and there's multiple unions and multiple workers and millions of people. It is a massive task. And that's my gut, Bill, why I think people don't even want to work on it. If you were a governor now and you said, I want to work on fixing the pension, the amount of negative attack ads that will be thrown at you, oh my God, it would be horrible. Absolutely.
You're labeled Darth Vader.
Yes. Well, Shelley brings up an important point, which I was worried too. She says, every governor in my lifetime has tried to steal from the pension fund, except Andrew Cuomo, unless he did it without public knowledge. So maybe. Are they doing that? Are they stealing from the? I hear that all the time. Is that a myth or is that real? Are they actually stealing from the pension fund?
I don't know that that's possible to do. What I'll tell you what does happen, and the city of Peekskill was a big culprit of this. About 15 years ago, a number of municipalities were running into trouble funding the pension system because it's also, you work for a city, county, or local government, you're in the pension system. So a lot of municipalities, when we had the last financial crisis in 2008, they were having difficulty making their contributions. So the state allowed them to borrow. And now that was not a wise move. That was not a wise move at all.
Yes, I heard about this. Yes, borrowing against. Maybe that's what Shelley means.
Could be.
Borrowing against it.
That should have never been allowed because now you have municipalities that are running into deeper and deeper trouble. And who's going to bail them out if they can't make these payments? Not a good situation.
That's right. That's right. So Joel goes on to say, New York State is begging for snowplow drivers. Working for the state doesn't seem to be a preferred place to work. Pension program is part of that. I think what Joel means is the pension plan either isn't trusted or isn't as good as it's been, maybe because of tier 6 or tier 7. Maybe that's what he's saying. Have you heard about this?
Well, I mean, all I can say is if you go to work in the private sanitation, what pension do you get there? I mean, if you're lucky, you get a 401k.
Right.
So I wouldn't poo-poo it. I mean, if you put the time in, if you're working in that job for 25 years, you're going to get a fairly decent pension.
That's true. Shelley goes on to say, we weren't supposed to have to pay for health insurance on the thruway because the tolls were coming off the thruway in 1974. Oh, because it was right. The tolls supposed to pay for this, right? Remember, we always have like tolls supposed to pay for this, or the lottery's going to pay for education. Yeah, that never seems to work, does it, Bill?
No, and speaking of the thruway, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I do. Back in the late 80s, when Andrew's father, Mario, was governor, he was running into difficulties, and he decided to sell Attica Prison to the Thruway Authority to raise money.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he was a clever SOB.
Wow.
And they magically fixed the budget. They sold assets from one state agency to another to plug all these holes.
Wow. Wow. Okay, there we go. See, Shelley, that's how they're stealing stuff. She goes on to one more thing and she says, go read the Venezuelan Constitution. I'm stealing that. Okay, so you have a fan right there. You definitely got a fan there. I do love that. So I want to, one more. Stephen says, the tiers are based on your starting date.
Correct.
You said they become flexible, though. So that's my other worry, right? Are they going to start being flexible? Like, as an example, I know California recently, the past couple of years, has decided that they will tax your pension even if you're in a state that doesn't have income tax. So if you move to Florida or Texas from California, they're still going to tax you. They don't care. So California's going to tax you. If you move to another state, they're still going to tax you. So you get double taxed. So if you move to a state that has income tax, you get first California's state tax, income tax. Then let's say you live in, say, I don't know, Oregon. Oregon, I think, has income tax. Then they're going to tax you again. So now you're going to get double taxed. My issue is, are they going to do what Shelley said? They're going to start shifting what the tiers mean? Or will they start doing schemes like double, triple taxing, things like that?
Yeah, I think if the pension system runs into trouble, they're going to come up with all kinds of schemes. By the way, let you in on a little secret.
Okay.
While the pension system is constitutionally protected, healthcare retiree benefits are not. And the state spends a lot of money on healthcare retiree benefits. So they could eliminate them. They could raise the deductibles, the premiums, the co-pays, and that's where they could plug the holes. And I fully think that that's what they would do. No,
that makes sense. And they'll say, just fall back to Medicaid.
Right.
Or Medicare. Yeah. Right. Fall back. Yeah. Fall back to Medicare. That's what we're going to say, right?
Yep.
So don't worry about it. Go back to Medicare. We'll take the benefits away. Yes. Wow. I hadn't even thought about that. You're right. That to me seems like the simplest and fastest way of plugging that hole. It's probably tens of billions of dollars.
Yep. You heard it here first. I'm predicting when everything goes south, that's what they'll do.
Yeah, that's the first step. I was thinking something else they'll do, and that is they will literally just make a rule saying, if you don't live in New York State, we're going to punish you in some way. Like if you live someplace else, instead of getting full pension, you get 75% pension, or you get 50% pension, or something like that. Because punishing out-of-staters is something New York State would do.
It would, but I think they would run afoul of a lot of interstate commerce laws. It probably would go to the Supreme Court. It's probably unconstitutional for them to do that. I think, well, first of all, let's back up a minute. The New York State pension, your first $25,000 of your pension, you pay no income tax on at all.
Okay.
So what they could do is just hike that up to 50.
Oh, I see.
You got to get the legislature to approve it, but that's not constitutionally protected. They can go from 25 to 50 to 100 to all of it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense too. Sure. So, but I guess my gut tells me though, if New York does something that seems to work, the other states will all just follow.
Well, that's the thing.
And then they'll just make it constitutional, right? They'll just, whatever the Supreme Court might say, they know, wait a minute, okay, let's pass a law to save our pensions. So we'll just make a federal law so that it will be constitutional to do the thing, right? That's where my head goes. Because the terrible situation that I think everyone wants to avoid is a state going into receivership. Yeah. Right, is a state going bankrupt, whenever that I think we're all afraid of, right? Illinois going bankrupt, or Kansas going bankrupt, or Jersey going bankrupt, and then the government, the federal government steps in and goes, "Okay, you're now mine." But the sad part is, if it works, like say Illinois goes bankrupt, I'm making this up, right? And the receivership actually works because the federal government absorbs all their debt, and it actually works. I think other states might beg for it. It's a mulligan, right? They would beg for the mulligan, wouldn't they?
Well, that's what they were talking about 3 or 4 years ago. The blue states were all relying on, I guess Obama was president at the time. Actually, probably 8 or 9 years ago, right after the great financial crisis.
Yep,
and they were running into trouble. All the blue states were going to Washington, basically asking for bailouts. And I think that they figured that if they could get that, they have the holes to plug. But, look we're well past that now. They tried it with COVID too. It's not going to be enough. This is not good. And now with the Republicans in control of the House, the Republicans are not going to do any favors for Kathy Hochul. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're right. Steven says the new contract with CSEA raised max 6 time from 1,600 to 1,800 hours for healthcare coverage for retirees. Oh, so they are raising it already. Well, there we go. Justin says New York forces Medicare to be the primary insurer when you reach the Medicare age, just to defer as much of the cost as they can as possible. Oh, I didn't know that. Is that true?
Yes. So when you're in retirement as a retired state or local employee in New York, Medicare becomes your primary coverage. But the state healthcare system layers on top of that. It's basically like Medicare Advantage. Actually, it's better.
Got it.
All you do is pay a copay and I think 10 or 15% of the total premium, and that's it. It covers everything.
There we go. So that you're right. That's what they'll take away. They'll take that piece away more than anything else. That makes total sense. Yes, I was actually unaware of that piece. Well, there we go, Justin. Thank you, Justin, for that. Appreciate it. Yes, absolutely. So we talked a lot about pensions. Absolutely. I get it. But there's something else I want to bring up, and that is raising money other than through taxation, right? And this is something that I feel like most people don't even comprehend. It's not something they even think about. They in two ways. One, they're not thinking outside the box for new ways of making it happen. That's piece one. But piece two, they don't recognize when they're being taken. Like, let's do a licensing fee, or let's do a hunting fee, or let's do a, speeding tickets. Instead of putting a speed bump, which slows people down, they put in a speed camera, which gives tickets, things like that. So 2 separate pieces. 1, not even thinking about another way of raising money. And then 2, when the state's hammering you for cash, you don't get that it's a money grab. I mean, have you had people talk about this at all with you?
A little bit, and of course I've experienced it. I was sitting in my car in New York City with the engine running, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, and a New York City police officer drove up, even though I wasn't driving that car, and ticketed me for not having my belt on. And she said, "Car's operating. You may not be driving it, but the motor's running. You have to wear your seatbelt." So I got popped with $100 or whatever. This is how they do it. They kill you with 1,000 cuts.
Yes. Welcome to New York City. $100, please. That's it. Yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think you're right. Right. This lowers the quality of life overall. And while that one ticket doesn't make you hate New York, like you said, it's 1,000 of them. It's the one ticket here, then the fee here, then the parking spot here, then the this. And before you know, you're like, wow, you're taking all my money. Stop. And then the funny thing is, then people look at the individual thing and go, look at you, Bill. You're mad because you got a ticket.
Yeah.
No, it's because it's the 14th thing this year that they pinged me on.
Right.
And that was $100, but there were 17 other things that were each $50, $100, $25. And now I'm losing $2, $3, $4 grand every year, giving money to the state. That's adult money. People feel that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, if I'm going 85 miles down the Taconic, as most people do, and I get pulled over, well, I think I deserve it, but this nickel and dime stuff, me sitting in the car with the engine running, I mean, I started the car, I was going to drive in about 5 minutes, and I was looking at something on my cell phone, and they come up and pop me. I mean, that's shoving it really under your nose.
Yes. And the funny part is, if that story was like the only story like that I heard, we wouldn't be upset because that was the one situation, whatever. But everybody has a story like this, right? It's not like you're the only guy that ever happened to, right? Lots of people have had this kind of story where, like, are you kidding me? Really? You hit me on this? Why would you? What? Like, where's the harm? Right? What am I doing? What's the problem? And they're like, don't care at all. Don't care at all. I think that is that's a big piece. Joseph actually says New York State Police is nothing but a ticketing operation. They do nothing else. I resent that a little, even though I think it's important to back the blue. Well, Joseph, my view is, of course you want. Oops, sorry about that. Of course you want to make sure that you're supporting whatever police force you have. Of course. But you want to support your police force when it's stopping bad guys and getting people who are creating victims, right? Of course. I mean, if someone's robbing you or beating you up, of course. But I agree with you. I hate the ticketing piece. My point is not that they shouldn't be ticketing. My point is earlier, are you ticketing because you want to raise money? Are you using it as a profit center, or are you using it because you want safety? And my example would be, Joseph, who would be one of my answers. You simply cap how much any municipality or city can take in from ticketing, whatever that number is. Say you can only take in, $5,000 or whatever's the number per year. That's it. So if you raise, tickets of 10,000 or more, you can only keep 5,000 or whatever the number is. Now cops are doing what I hope they're doing, which is there's no incentive to do extra tickets. The incentive is just to make sure that people are being safe. So, Joseph, if you're doing 90 miles an hour on the Parkway, maybe you need a ticket so you can remember to not speed so much and not hurt people. I'm okay with that. But if you're doing, 72 and a 65, he can say, dude, slow down, right? Just stop being a jerk. There's no incentive to ticket you unless he thinks you need something. So I think if we made that kind of thing happen, I do think it'll be better. I don't know. Where are you on that, Bill?
Well, he makes a very good point, because if you recall that horrible case in Staten Island of Eric Garner,
yes,
people forget this. And what those 5 police officers did to him was absolutely inexcusable. But the backstory, which never got adequate attention, was that de Blasio was so desperate for money, he was threatening the police with disciplinary action if they didn't meet their quotas. He put the heat on cops big time. And so they were under tremendous pressure. That doesn't excuse what they did, but he had a role in it too, and he partially has blood on his hands for that incident because of the way they created these quotas with this type of pressure to make this a money gouging operation. That's all it was. He was selling loose cigarettes, loosies, and he lost his life over it.
I completely agree. And that's what I always say all the time. People go, Larry, I don't know. Do you like Back the Blue or not? And I say the same thing. Cops are people. If you put them in a bad situation, they'll act badly. If you give them a bad environment, you'll have worse outcomes. Better environment, better outcomes. Here's what I'm sure. Those cops didn't want to be messing with Eric Garner, right? To your point. They were doing it because they were getting pressure. Hey, make money. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Right? Because that's a fine. They were pressured to do that. Pressure them to get bad guys. Pressure them to solve murders and to stop people who are, robbing people. Do that, right? Have them pressure them to stop shoplifters, right? Those things, stealing stuff. That I'm into. Let's do that. But why are we messing with people who are doing, loose cigarettes, right? Not the big deal at all. I completely agree. And so that's what I'm saying. I think you're right. You have a better environment. You have better outcomes. I think absolutely. So Justin's teasing. He goes, speak for yourself. One illegitimate ticket is enough to make me hate New York. So he's like, just one and I'm out. That's him. So yes, absolutely. So Juan says, New York State loves their fees. I just found out that there's a yearly fee to obtain a stargazing permit on Long Island. Oh, I didn't know that. So a permit to view the stars. Wow. John goes on to say, I can't believe there's a stargazing permit as specific parks in New York State through the Parks and Recreation Department. So if you want to go into the parks and view the stars, you need a permit for that. Wow. Someone thought, how can we make some extra cash? That's a way. That's a way. Well, for those who don't know about stargazing, the more light you have in your area, the harder it is to see the stars. So you want to go to areas that have low light, which is often parks. If you live in urban areas, you have to go to a park. If you live out, in the rural areas, it's fine. It doesn't matter. But if you live in urban areas, you have to find parks that don't have low light so you can stargaze. That's why you would want to do that. So, wow, that is crazy. So let me ask you, Bill, before we wrap up, is there something else you want to bring up, something else you want to chat about?
Well, I have no regret about having been your running mate.
Thank you.
I did 4 podcasts. This is the 5th. And I spoke to 12 of our county committees, either in person or by Zoom. And I learned something very important. Even people in our libertarian base need education.
Yes.
So, for example, I was speaking about the Federal Reserve and central bank digital currencies known as CDBCs. And I won't mention the county, but there were a couple of people in the audience in that county who didn't know what a CDBC was.
Yep.
Every single libertarian, every single New Yorker, and every single American should know what a CDBC is, because if the Federal Reserve goes through with this, your financial freedom is done. It's a system of track, trace, and control. If they don't like that you're going to Washington, D.C. to protest our meddling in Ukraine, well, when you have a CDBC, they can just deny you access to filling your car with gas, buying a bus ticket, buying a plane ticket, and you're done for. This is really, really bad. And these are the type of issues that we as libertarians need to get educated on. And 100%. We need to start educating our fellow citizens about it, because these are the type of things that we have to stop. They got through the Patriot Act 15 years ago, and we can't let them get through anymore. We got to start peeling the onion back and getting rid of all of the oppressive legislation like the Patriot Act that they've already put in, not letting them put any more on our backs. We're done for if we don't stop this.
No, I completely agree. And to our earlier point, when finances begin to collapse, they're going to reboot by doing that. And they're going to tell us, no. It's to save you money. See, it's to protect you. It's because we love you, Bill. That's the reason why. It's not to control you. It's because we love you. The worst part, though, I'll find out is what happens when they decide that you can only buy certain things.
Right.
Even that, right? So, you can't buy certain things or go to certain stores or whatever the case may be. So all of a sudden they change that too. Or what happens now? You can't pay your rent. Or worse, they flag you when you buy a certain thing or your money goes to a certain store. Oh, Bill bought that thing. He must be one of those people. Let's go get him. He's one of the bad people that we've decided are bad this week or whatever next week's bad guy is.
Or you didn't want to get the jab. That's a good one to shut your money off.
Yes, you won't do as we say. No money. How are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay your rent? You can't pay your rent now. You got a car note. You're going to lose your car.
Right.
Because you can't pay it. Wow. Yeah, no, it's right. And then what they'll do is they'll wind up doing the dumbest stuff, which is because you can't pay, we'll punish you by not letting you pay.
Right.
That's what they'll do. But now I can't pay because you frozen my stuff. Yeah, because you didn't pay. But now I can't pay. Find a way. That's what they'll do. 100%. No, I'm glad you brought this up because there's a thing about all types of digital or cryptocurrencies. Libertarians like it because it seems cool, right? We do have that in us. Like, it seems so cool. We do have that. But your point is very valid. Once you have a centralized, basically state coin, that's no longer cool. The coolness just goes away.
The other thing they can do with it is, particularly if you're getting your money from Social Security or public assistance, then they've got you totally by the short hairs because your income source is them as well.
Right.
They can, if the economy is running into difficulty, and they decide in their minds that Americans need to spend more, they can send the digital currency to your checking account. They could make it diminish in value by 3% a month to force you to spend it. So not only can they shut off your spending, but they can force you to spend it by making it diminish in value. It's programmable money.
Now, I guess the other worry is if they do something like that, then does that make the dollar itself useless, the physical dollar useless?
Well, I think ultimately the goal would be to abolish cash altogether.
Which makes me feel like cash would wind up becoming the black market money.
Kind of, yeah.
Right? Because how else are you gonna? Right? You've got to have a black market money somehow, right? So there's going to be a black market. So the dollar might wind up being black market money.
The only problem is it's not backed by anything. So you'll have gold, silver, maybe a bottle of Dewar's will buy you stuff.
Well, my thought process is like, as many people who are into money know, I'm preaching to the choir for you, Bill, but other men I know this, money has value because we say it has value, right? That's why it has value now. So if they all of a sudden say, well, here's digital currency, and the black market as a whole decides the dollar is worth X ounces of gold, and we all accept that as true, I think it could become a black market if the people within that market all agree.
You're right. I mean, it has value because they say it's worth X, but that works only as long as the public believes it. If the public says, no, that doesn't have $10, that bill is not worth $10 anymore.
Right.
Then they're screwed. Then the game's up.
Right. Joseph asks, is the CDBC the same thing as the digital dollar?
If it's issued by a governmental entity, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's funny. And then he goes on to say they could say you can't buy a gun with the money.
Bingo.
Yes.
Bingo.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely, 100%. Yes. So I think that's the biggest issue. Wow, that was good. Shelley goes on to talk about stimulus checks. You could then, like, this is your point. You wouldn't even have to worry about stimulus checks. You could just raise the value or lower the value of the check you're already getting.
Yes.
Or even fool people into lowering the value of the check you have and then writing you another digital check, which is really the same amount of money, but it feels better because they gave you 2 checks.
Right.
And you wouldn't know if they lowered the value. You probably wouldn't know right away unless you were very savvy. The average person is just living their life. That got me thinking about this. So your dollar goes, your digital dollar doesn't go as far. So they write you a second digital check, and you go, oh, they love me. They wrote me a second digital check, but they're the ones who lowered the value of the dollar in the first place.
Right. Right.
Now I'm becoming extra scared, Bill. I'm extra scared now.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look at when 5 years ago inflation was running at 1 to 2%. That's theft. They stole 1 to 2% of your paycheck, but it was nickel and dime stuff, and most people didn't care. Now that inflation is 8 to 9%, now people are feeling it and they're saying, "Hold on."
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Inflation, while it's always been there, it was, I feel like we had accepted it as the thing, right? That's how it worked. Now it's like, whoa. I remember, and I still tell a story. It tells you how old I am. I remember my first time I ever dealt with inflation. I was probably 7, maybe 8. I was in the Bronx where I used to live, and I went to a place called Joe's Pizza, and I would go get a slice. And a slice of pizza, when I was that little, was 40 cents. So I'd go and get my slice of pizza. And then I went there one day, and I gave him 50 cents, and he gave me a nickel back. He didn't give me a dime. And I said, what? No, you made a mistake. I told him you made a mistake. No. I get a dime back. He's like, no, it's a nickel. I said, no, I get a dime back. He's like, no, the pizza went up to 45 cents. I was like, pizza went up? That blew my mind. I was like, what? How can the price go up? I'm 7. I don't understand what price going up means. So I went home, and my mom and dad were like, yeah, that's inflation. That's how that works. And that was my first time. And now pizza's like, I don't know, $2.50 a slice or whatever it is now. It's like, it's a whole lot more. But anyway, I still remember that. But even then, we felt that inflation was okay. Like, we could deal with it, right? We accepted it. And to your point, maybe we should have never accepted it.
Right, exactly. Because if you think about it, we're a technologically driven society, and technology by nature is deflationary. So look at flat screen TVs, computers, cell phones, all of those things, because of advancement in technology, have been made cheaper.
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve, by printing currency out of thin air, is working against that. They're pushing it in the other direction. So even the things we have over time that became deflationary, like computers, probably would have been even more deflationary. And that's a good thing. The dollar is increasing in value. Your money goes further. So they're working against your interest by inflating the currency. I mean, it's just an outrageous form of theft when you think about it.
Absolutely. Juan says, it was an honor to write in William Schmidt for comptroller. We need more people like Bill in government. People who actually know what they're talking about. I agree completely.
Thank you, Juan.
With that, I think it's a perfect time to wrap up. I want to say, Bill, thank you so much for coming on. You know I love you. I'm so happy that I know you. I'm happy you're in my life. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
I would love to. Definitely. Keep me in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Everybody else, I want to say thank you so much for watching. Please, if you want to follow him, please follow him on Bill Schmidt 4 NY on Twitter. And if you can like, comment, share, let people know what we're talking about, what's happening here today. I would really appreciate it. It's very helpful. Guys, thank you so much. I will see you all very soon.